Welcome, everybody, to the Speaking Up with Patrick Schilling podcast, the podcast that aims at expanding your horizon. You already guessed it. My name is Patrick, and I just love having great conversation with amazing people. So, bear with me as I present to you amazing speakers whose ideas may truly change your life. Today, I'm talking to Zach Dow. Zach and I became very good friends during my time in the United States. We both studied at NC State University together, where he pursued his degree in business administration with a concentration in finance. Over the years, he has taken a lot of statistics courses as the field he predominantly is interested in. Zach has now moved on to start his master's program at Duke University's Fuqua School of Management, where he studies quantitative management. So naturally, as is always the case with old friends, our conversation leads us a bit from his field of interest and studies to how data and society are interrelated, to the caveats that are really inherent to the subject as well. We touch briefly on the ad industry. We touch on the internet economy. We touch on machine learning and how the process of analyzing large sets of data works, to really his vision for the future, how he thinks data can really make this world a better place. So just listen to the conversation. It's been a great conversation. And without further ado, I present you Zachary Dow. Hey everybody, I'm here today with my good friend Zachary Dow. We've met in the US. We haven't talked to each other really in quite some time. Zach, how have you been?
Hey Patrick, I'm doing well. I am sitting here in beautiful North Carolina and enjoying my day. How are you?
I am excellent, man. Thank you so much for taking the time for this. I know you're incredibly busy with everything that's going on. I really appreciate you coming on here and kind of figuring this out with me. So really nice talking to you again.
Absolutely, Patrick. I'm excited. I love talking to you. I know that this podcast is going to be an amazing hit, and it's going to be super exciting, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Could I have all of that in writing so that I can put it up the wall in my room?
Look, man, don't push it, all right?
All right. But Zach, so tell our listeners a bit about you. You've just recently started a new study program. Just talk a bit about that. Introduce us to what's going on in the life of Dow.
Will do. So I'm studying at Duke University here in Durham, North Carolina. I'm getting my master's in Quantitative Management in Business Analytics at the Duke's Fuqua School of Business. So it's really focusing on how data interacts with businesses and how to make informed decisions. We're learning tools such as machine learning and different algorithms. I've been coding mostly in R and SQL and Python for the last few months. And you know, it's a very interesting program where we're focusing deeply on application with a decent background in theory to really kind of, as society is kind of growing with this large amount of data, we need trained professionals who can not only do the algorithms but also interpret it in a very strong context. So that's kind of what I'm studying right now, is really being able to be the technical side of things, but also being able to bridge that gap between technical understanding and business and real world application.
That's really cool. And for those of the listeners who don't know, you yourself actually have a business background in your undergrad, don't you?
I do. I studied business administration with a concentration in finance, and I kind of developed a love of statistics and mathematics while I was studying finance. I actually have a good friend of mine who was very interested in statistics, and just hearing him talk about it and hearing him talk about the power it had in the field that he focused in, which is biology, it was just extremely interesting to me. And the more research I did and the more classes I took, the more I kind of deeply fell in love with the idea of using data to really extrapolate and get answers. Because there's people tend to over or underestimate things that happen, and with statistics and data science, you can really kind of get a stronger, clearer understanding and have situations be less gray.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of time, or at least that's what, I've heard from many people. People are a bit shied away by, all the statistical tools that you would have to know. You mentioned your coding, and a lot of time, especially when people come out of business, they're generalists essentially, right? They do their 4-year programs. They know a bit of that, a bit of that. They've had some marketing classes, whatever, some strategy classes, and then they're faced with the decision of where to go. Are they gonna go in finance, or are they gonna stay in marketing, try to be creative, be on that side, or are they gonna go into supply chain? So what would your pitch be to people like that, of why they should in fact not be shied away by all the statistics behind what you're doing, but that being a data scientist is actually a cool thing, not only for a business person, but for everyone, essentially. What would your pitch be there?
That's actually a really good question. I think my pitch for it mostly is that I think people do get shied away from it, like you were saying, because of the math and the statistics and the technical side of things in data science. But it's really, data science is a lot of an art as opposed to a science. And I think if you talk to a lot of statisticians, they would probably say that statistics is not just mathematics, and they would argue that it's a lot harder than pure mathematics. I'm not going to make a claim to that or not. I'm not a statistician, but a lot of people would argue that statistics is harder than mathematics because there's an art to it. There's an interpretation to it. There is a context to it that is deep and relative to what you're doing. And there's kind of a beauty to that, where you have to have an in-depth and understand knowledge of the thing that you're doing, and how you and the background and what you're doing and what you understand. Statistics is a beautiful vehicle to deeply understand anything you're passionate about, I think, is really the best way to summarize it. If you look at any major graduate program or PhD program, you have these people, all of them have to take some level of statistics so that they can more deeply understand the thing that they're studying and bring that into context. That's the whole point of statistics. It's taking data and then bringing it into context in a way that can further the understanding of the thing that you want to know. And there's a beauty to that. There's a beauty to doing that. For instance, I'm working on a project right now. We're trying to model certain test passage rates in schools in New York City, and it's very interesting because I'm in a group with a lot of international students, and it's very interesting to hear to have to explain context behind something that they might not know, not being from the United States. For instance, what a community school is and how that affects neighborhoods and different ethnic populations and communities and different areas of New York City, and how that kind of plays out historically, and why certain places might be a little more impoverished, or why they might be growing, and so we're doing math, but in order to do that, you have to understand the context behind it to be able to build these models.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So I especially like the part when you said it's more a vehicle that helps you understand things than it is, simple data manipulation or number manipulation. So in this project that you're working on right now, or in any other project, I think what might be pretty interesting to know, even for me as someone who has worked with large data sets himself, but let's say, how can we envision kind of the process that you walk through when you are faced with a data set, like the initial point of contact you have with a big, let's say, spreadsheet with thousands and thousands of rows and columns and data points. Like, what is the first thing you do, and how do you move on with that? Like, how do you create the insight and move on from the pure data and actually gain insight out of that?
So the first thing you do if you get a large spreadsheet with a lot of data is you upload it into a program that's much better than just a spreadsheet. Uh, Typically a software package Yeah, I mean, you can R, SAS, Python, SPSS, whatever your tool of choice is in the big data sphere. But you know the next thing you really need to do is you need to look at you need to look at it. You know, I have a professor right now who's a very good statistician. He hammers home to us about what we call exploratory data analysis, right? So you look at the data and you look at it in its messy form, and you kind of make graphs. You look at just basic assumptions on a data level. So how are things correlated, for instance, which, you know, for the audience of people who don't quite know what correlation is, it's just it basically measures how two factors can move together. So kind of think of height and age. You know, typically as you, at least to a point, as you get older, your height will increase. It does level off and it becomes non-continuous, but that's more deep than we really need to get here. But you know, you take this data and you look at it and you get a basic handle on some exploratory analysis. Just you have to look at your data, you know, and I think that's the intimidating part of data science is people look at all these rows of data and they just see numbers on a page and they don't quite know what to do. But you know, if you make a few bar charts and some line graphs, it typically takes away some of that intimidation. However, in the data science community, you should more or less never make a pie chart. Those are typically viewed as the worst thing you could do. But yeah, so
All right, that is very good to know. I certainly don't want to piss off the data science community. So that's a good
you,
hint right there.
you do not. They know everything about you. It's
Look, man, look. It's too early to get creepy here. Okay.
Oh man, yeah. It's a fascinating thing to look at this data though and visualize it, and then from there, I mean, you know, the ugly part of data is the cleaning. So that's why you know, you learn a lot of things in a language like SQL where you can extract data and clean it and get information that you need from it. But yeah, so I mean,
Right.
it's a lot of looking at data, basic exploration, a little graphing, cleaning with a program like SQL or Python, and then from there you can model. You know, you can do the data science, the thing that most people think of as data science, where you're creating different models.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. All right. Well, that makes a lot of sense and helps me, and I'm sure the listeners as well, to understand the process a bit more. But I want to, if I may, dive a bit deeper into the application of the things you're doing. So you mentioned earlier that you have a good friend who applied statistics to biology. Knowing you, you've outlined a bit to me what you hope you want to do with this, but how does this vehicle, as you describe it, how will it help you to, you know, have an impact, to improve something? Like what do you hope you can do with this, like 10, 50, 15, or 20 years down the road?
So for me, the my real inspiration to kind of become, you know, somebody who works with data was a man named Hans Rosling, who I'm sure some of the listeners have heard of, and if not, he was a Swedish health researcher and statistician, and he believed in what he called therapy through data, and
Mm,
he worked a lot to kind of show that the world as a whole is becoming a better and better place and is really growing, as opposed to, you know, the negative news we get constantly, where we're hammered by, you know, the news of countries or people doing horrible things and bad things happening around the globe. He really believed that showing people in data and data visualizations that things are actually getting better, that your mind can rest assured that humanity is actually growing as opposed to regressing. So I hope to be able to work on similar things, where he was a health researcher. He unfortunately did pass away a few years ago now. He's a great man,
mm.
and society will truly miss him. Bill Gates was actually a very big friend of his, and I read about it, and Bill Gates wrote a letter about his friend Hans Rosling. If anybody cares to know more about Hans Rosling or anything like that, I urge you to read that.
And
But
he wrote a pretty cool book. Remind us of the name here.
oh
Like
yes,
the,
his new book just came out recently. It's called Factfulness by Hans
Yes.
Rosling. He works with his daughter and son-in-law, and or his son and daughter-in-law. Don't quote me on that. I can't remember, but he he worked with them to help write that book and get that finished out. And they've kind of, from what I've gathered from the book, is they've been a team for a while, kind of working at this goal. They have a project called the Gapminder Project. Again, it's, if you have any interest in data in the world and seeing how it's getting better, I urge you to get to look into that. But yeah, so I really wanted to, I kind of follow in those steps where, you can see improvements in the world and in life through data. And, my program's focus is mostly on business applications, but there are a lot of applications within businesses to look into that. Like, Stuke is pretty well known for its medical programs, and I'm hoping to be able to work with some of the hospital portions and work with data there, as well as really trying to just create a better understanding of health outcomes within, especially the United States, where healthcare is a huge topic right now. I'm still working on trying to understand the vehicles for me, how I get from where I am now to where I want to be. It's a bit of a process for sure, but yeah, I'm hoping, a la Hans Rosling, to be able to create a better understanding of the quality of life in regions of the world, and especially in the United States, and going forward. That's what I hope to do.
Man, I'm sure you're gonna reach all of that. And I think the medical data example that you just mentioned is actually a pretty cool example, as it has so much potential to not only help people understand better what the state of medicine is globally, but also so kind of on that macro level, but also a bit more on the micro level. I mean, there are so many cool applications where you can not only know the statistical chance of someone who's been diagnosed with a certain disease, let's say cancer, for instance, on how long they'll survive, or how much the chances that they're actually going to be treated, but also the predictive aspect is what I think to be something exceptionally interesting. So let's say there are a couple of statistical models right now, and please feel free to enlighten us on that a bit more. But from what I've read and heard, is that there are a lot of statistical capabilities today that would actually allow you to predict with some statistical significance how likely it is for you to be diagnosed with a certain disease at one point of the time during your life, and if that event should occur, how likely it is for you to be ever treated. So what do you make of these kinds of predictions, and how do you think they're going to sort of affect the way we live our lives?
It's kind of a twofold answer to that question. It's a very good question, but I think it gives the medical community a larger set of knowledge, so we can be more prepared as medicine advances, and we know what we need to be fighting up against. We become stronger as a society, and as the medical community tries to strictly focus on the things that we know via modeling are going to be the real prevalent problems of the future and the now. So that becomes that's a very good thing. But you also have a kind of a problem with, where if you tell people that they have a high chance of developing a disease, it can become almost negatively, like kind of vested in their mindset. So people will overthink about the disease that they can get, but it also can create a level of caution. So if someone told me that I have a much higher risk for diabetes, as a person, I might lower my sugar intake or the carbohydrates that I eat on a regular basis, and I would hopefully exercise and diet properly. That's the hope, anyway. And it's yeah. So the better we get at modeling human health and diseases, the better we get at being able to prepare for the diseases to come, and and hopefully the better educated we can make the general public, because that's really the key here, is that there needs to be a good amount of education about health to the public. which is, I mean, to go back to Hans Rosling, which was, I think, a good thing that he tried to do, and also in the same vein of trying to show you that the world is getting better in a health sense. So, if we can educate the public, like, we know you're healthier, we know medicine is making you healthier, but here are some steps further that are good for you, and they're good for your children, and these are things that we can do going forward.
Yeah, definitely, and it's a quite a fascinating point that you're raising here, because in the second that, let's say your general practitioner confronts you with the information that based on this statistical model, you're 80% likely to develop a disease that is likely to kill you by 65. That is when data that is in itself rather neutral, right? It is just a kind of a reflection of some part of reality or of perception. That's when data becomes really intertwined with a series of ethical questions. Should we, tell people that they're like more likely to die than maybe, their neighbor next door, but also with a political dimension, and also with a economic dimension. I know a lot of people, especially in Europe, and especially in especially in Central Europe, Germany, or what other countries, are exceptionally concerned about that exact stuff, about healthcare providers collecting all their data, no matter how valuable the outcome might be. Because if I hear, as you mentioned, the news that I'm more likely to get cancer if I don't change certain aspects of my life, that could actually be perceived as an opportunity for me. However, people are so opposed to the idea of someone collecting data as sensitive as about your individual health, that this becomes really a political issue. So what are your thoughts on that? Like the entire data protection issue, the entire question of should a healthcare provider collect data about you, or do the potential benefits, are they worth the cost of you giving up the most intimate of data about you? What is your thought on that?
It's a tricky subject, especially right now. For those who heard about the Equifax breach, where they lost, uh, I think it was millions of people's of information, such as social security numbers, addresses, and phone numbers. There was that's a massive data breach and a massive breach of security that this agency, who is collecting data for the use of banks in a way that we don't necessarily, agree to in a direct way, is it's troubling, and it scares people that this company with bad data infrastructure, their all this information was just stolen from them, and that's stolen and thereby stolen from us. So I totally understand the worry of that data breach from society, and as a person, and as an individual, because it is scary to think that your information could get stolen. And people have hypothesized that if all these healthcare companies have information on you, they can sell it to future employers. There could be discrimination based on it. For instance, somebody might not want to hire you, especially in the United States, where they have to provide you insurance. They might not want to hire you based on a medical condition, because then the insurance is going to cost them more. Or
Right.
these are things that are genuine concerns about data protection going forward. Which you it, it becomes tricky, though, where you're right that there is that benefit of free data use in the world. If the more data that's out there, the better models can be built, the better people can look at them. And the sooner we can tell someone, you might have this disease, and these are the steps we can take to help you prevent that. This is what we can do. But it, to qualm fears, or I'm sorry, excuse me, to stop fears of data protection, is we're going to need some strong regulation around data protection. I personally think there's an ethical dilemma here, where the powers that be need to ensure that there is a level of protection that is over people, that they can that their information won't be sold to the highest bidder, that their information won't be overly collected and without permission. But as we see as a society, as we keep going, this becomes harder and harder to ensure. I mean, look at the Cambridge Analytica scandal with Facebook,
Mm.
or look at, even look at the NSA in the United States collecting extreme amounts of metadata on its citizens and people abroad. So these are worrying problems, and I guess the question that I kind of ask back to your question almost a little bit is, can we put the genie back in the bottle? Is there a way to really to cut back this data gathering and this data infrastructure that exists now to just collect every piece of known information about humans and stop that? Because it seems to be a difficult task to do. So in my mind, it's almost if we are at this point where we can't go back anymore, we should probably try to make the most of it. But and I'm not saying that necessarily we are past that point, but in my mind, I
Right.
see a hard way to turn back. So what do you think about that?
So, I mean, one aspect of that question is definitely about the potency behind it. Like, would we still be able to if we wanted to? But then I guess the other question on a more meta level would be, should we actually stop it? And the way I see it, we're kind of at this point right now where we have to make the decision which direction we're going to choose. So, are we going to stay sort of in this model of data privatization where we say, all right, so here are 5 data points about myself. Whoever bids highest gets it. Which is, kind of the case right now, where there are markets for data, where some companies are specialized in actually collecting data about us and then selling them to whoever bids the highest. But at least in that model, data gets a certain value attributed to it, right? Whereas in the only alternative that I really see here, without making it too, black or white, is that data is sort of socialized, if that is the right word here, that we kind of create a socialist uh, sphere where data is just being omitted and being deprived of its value, kind of. So let's say, let's model a world here in which, kind of like in The Circle, if you've read the book or watched the movie, where kind of like everyone knows everything about everyone. So data is just kind of being spread out there, and it's just kind of there, and there's no more real value to it, which would be a great thing for, on the honest player that would kind of take the data and would analyze it and would use it altruistically for the greater good of humanity. In that ideal world, I would absolutely agree that, there would be so much good to come from that. However, the reality that we live in, and also a bit the reality that has been set by the European Union's GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, is that data should have a value. Data should belong and should, be able to be monetized by the person who created the data point. And we're getting incredibly technical here, but so basically the answer would be, well, we could. I mean, we could stop the path we're going right now. We could just take the GDPR and make that kind of even more restrictive and say, hey, look, where I live, how old I am, how healthy I am, is my data, is my like, I have ownership around that, and if I wanted to, I could sell it. Let's take Facebook as an example here. Right now, what Facebook does is they take all the data that we voluntarily, more or less, kind of publish about ourselves, and they make the money with it. And that's actually how they, finance their company, through advertising, through personalized ads. But what if we lived in a world in which, you could individually kind of sell each data point of use? Do you think that, some years down the road, data could actually replace our currency replace the US dollar or the euro, and that you could actually pay with data. Is that something you would ever see happening?
So yeah, so it's an interesting question, Patrick, and I think data is an incredibly valuable thing, especially in today's day and age. But I don't know necessarily if I can see data replacing a currency in its entirety. I know there are cryptocurrencies right now and things built on blockchain technology that are commoditizing and restoring agency of data back to people. And so, it becomes a slight issue of what data is more valuable. Is health data, consumer data. So it's a very interesting concept. I don't necessarily know if I see it completely replacing a currency backed by a government such as the euro or the USD, but I do see I do see it being able to be kind of like a supplement to earn currency in the form of crypto and exchanging that in the way that you do for currency as well. But yeah, so because if you create that level of agency, if you give that level of agency back to people to source their own data, it also does eliminate a level of convenience that you kind of get by allowing these companies to harvest your data, which I know is kind of an interesting thing to listen to and hear about, but I think for a lot of people they wouldn't agree with that. But they're Amazon knows what you want to buy based on the fact that other people have bought it, and they can use machine learning and algorithms to help understand what you might buy next and what you need and what you like. And Facebook can find friends based on who you're friends with and other people they're friends with, and you eliminate a level of convenience almost if you don't let these companies use your data. And how much convenience do you lose is completely up to debate, and depends on how convenient you find these things. But it's definitely, these companies have been able to build the robust platforms that they exist on because they can, you agree to use their services and they can harvest data essentially. So your data is clearly valuable, but do people have the idea of, if they have agency over their data, are they willing to sell that to people in a way that makes sense on both ends?
Right, right. That's definitely something that has come up ever since the internet economy kind of started, and we have over the years pretty much trained ourselves to expect to be able to use services for free, right? Facebook is a prime example here. Something has to finance their operations and their business. However, when you just use it, there's no direct medium of payment for you. Whereas, if you go to a swimming pool or to a sauna or whatever, you're perfectly fine with paying $10 for an hour of swimming. So do you think, what are the alternatives here? Like, could you ever see a shift of mind in the internet economy where you'd say, all right, well, I'll use Facebook, or I'll shop on Amazon, or I'll even use the Google engine, but pay 10, 50, $100 or euros a year, whatever it's determined to be worth. Could you ever see something like this work?
Absolutely not. I don't think you can.
That didn't take you much thinking.
Yeah, no, it didn't. I mean, if you all of a sudden, if you logged on to Twitter or Facebook tomorrow and they said you can use this for a small monthly fee of $2 a month, I mean, either one of those companies would lose, I mean, millions of active users, I think, overnight.
Yeah.
You would never see people transition to the mindset of, oh, I love this service and I can just pay a few dollars. Like, I mean, I think YouTube is a great example. I probably watch most of my online entertainment on YouTube. I follow a lot of YouTubers, and if I logged on to YouTube and there's a direct service to use that specifically, I think I would have to really consider it. I don't pay for cable. I just watch things on the internet, and I'll watch advertisements, I suppose, if need be, to help fund these people and support them directly.
Well,
But
that's a fair point, Zach. But like, your parents, my parents, they were watching, television, and they were, when in doubt, watching, the same crap that we're watching on the internet, cat videos or whatnot. I love cat videos, by the way. I almost feel bad for using that as an example,
You
but
should not.
they were.
You should
I,
not.
I know. Let's say bird videos. I hate
Why?
bird videos. I don't know. Birds are kind of mean, man. They they hunt you down.
What about cow videos? Because happy cows are really cute.
They can be, but all right. Well, let's go with cow videos. Well, they're not. They are, as cute as they might be, they're certainly not something that would be, that was accessible to our parents and their generation for free. Like, they couldn't just sit in front of their screen without paying for cable and hope that magically, a happy cow is gonna jump across their screen. So it used to be like that. Consumption of content, which is what it boils down to, used to be valued through immediate monetization, through payment streams that came from the recipient directly to the creator. Now we kind of have this intermediary who shows you ads. So if it has worked before, do you think we're moving up the evolutionary ladder of media consumption by adding sort of the ads actor, or do you think this is maybe a step back where we shouldn't expect to just get everything for free, but pay with something that we don't even know, has value, or that we don't even perceive the value of?
It's a very good question, and I do think I think I almost want to kind of claw back some of the comments I made in a few minutes ago, because I thought of it, and I think for instance, if I had to pay for a service like YouTube, I probably would, because I don't pay for things like cable or that. I pay for Netflix, for instance, I guess, and I find value in that. So
well, because The Office is on Netflix.
I could not live if I could not watch The Office. I'm not sure how you're doing it over there in Dublin with The Office not being on Netflix, but anyway.
Look, I bought it. I have to admit right here, I bought it. I could not do it.
All 8 seasons?
Yep.
That's perfect.
And they're 9, by the way.
That's what I meant. 9 seasons.
Exactly.
I don't know.
But yeah, I mean,
doesn't count.
You're right. But that's maybe a different podcast. We should do a podcast just about The Office.
We should.
But we'll do that another time, though.
Yeah. So I mean, there's value in these services that I utilize and I like, and I guess the change in consumption, I guess I feel like it's almost like, for the consumer, we need the best of both worlds, right? So when you paid for cable television like our parents did, because we certainly don't, is that you paid for cable, you got cable, but you also had to watch advertisements. And to me, in a modern sense, that seems ridiculous, because I pay for Netflix and I watch Netflix and I don't have to watch any advertisements. It's just Office 24/7. And so I think it needs to get to this point where people feel comfortable paying for things, but then the no advertisement idea is really nice, because I think I guess for me, advertising seems to be getting less and less effective with things like ad block online. I don't have any data to back that up. I could be completely wrong, because I guess if I was, Facebook would be in decline, Google would be failing, and Amazon wouldn't function. So advertising obviously still works, but I think that people are less open to advertising now, and people are more likely to try to avoid it or just ignore the side of their Facebook feed. And I think that the reason why data harvesting is so popular is because people want to get you, these companies want to get you the most relevant ads, right? That's their idea, because they get money if you click through and you make a purchase, and Facebook is super thrilled if you click those side banner ads for them, because that's how they get paid. They can prove that they are an effective company in delivering advertisements to consumers. So if people had to pay for Facebook, would they stop doing the advertisements, or would they continue to do advertisements and just make money on top of that, or would Facebook just cease to exist because people don't want to pay for it? It's an interesting question because it dives right at the heart of what kind of media do people consume, why do people consume it, and how can companies that provide content really make money off of it.
Right, right. Well, there are definitely a couple of interesting frameworks out there, and the GDPR is definitely something that is really a land shift here, and it's going to be interesting to see how it will develop over the next couple of years. And it's actually, I think, step number one is going to be for people our age, especially, but for everyone who's out there and who consumes media through various channels, to become cognizant of the fact that you know, data science or the analysis of huge amounts of data is really, what makes all of this possible. And I want to shift the conversation a bit more over the next couple of minutes to some of the new emerging tools that are coming up. We've mentioned machine learning quite a bit. We've mentioned the blockchain quite a bit, all of which are, incredibly capable tools. But I would imagine you working with machine learning, um, like it's such a big buzzword, and everyone kind of knows what it is, but no one really knows how it works. So, have you had any touch points with it so far in your studies or in your work uh, beyond the studies?
So for me right now, I am no expert on machine learning. I know very little machine learning, but I do know that people really struggle to kind of understand the concept. And I think conceptually, I have an okay understanding of it, and I can kind of explain it through an example. I think people tend to get. It's I'm still in the infancy of my master's degree, so again, I'm not an expert, and if I say something wrong, someone please correct me somewhere in the comments or wherever this is posted, and any way you can, please correct me. I love to learn, and if I'm wrong, it's one good way of learning. But I find that people think, depending on whose definition you follow, machine learning can be anything from a basic linear regression, where you're just trying to fit a line to a bunch of points and, have that move based on points. So multiple linear regression can be considered where you have multiple factors. Say you're trying to predict weight and you use age and height, you have different points and you're trying to predict these factors. But a really good example I use, and this will probably work better for the Americans listening than maybe people abroad who don't necessarily apply for credit cards as much, but a credit card application, right? So when you apply for a credit card, you put in, your in the U.S. you put in your social security number, your address, your income, and you hit apply, and it's a computer on the back end making the decision whether they approve you or they send you to a human review. They don't really deny people anymore right online. They either approve you or they send you to a human for review. And if you get approved, what the computer and what the machine has done is that it's taken the data point. So it pulled your credit score based on your social security number. It's taken your income into a factor. And if you think of a grid where the y-axis is income and the x-axis is credit score, the higher your credit score and the higher your income, you're going to be in what they call a cluster of people who are more likely to pay it back. And there are different, you can use cluster algorithms, k nearest neighbor, different kinds of techniques that we won't get into the best tax and the math behind that because I don't think it's going to be valuable here. But it looks at your point, your income versus your credit score, and it says, okay, this person is near these people. And so say you have an 800 credit score, which is very good, and you make $200,000 a year. And the algorithm will make a quick decision based on the likelihood of you being able to pay back your credit card bill. And the likelihood there is very high. And then it passes you on to another section where they decide on credit limit based on similar factors, and so on and so forth. And that's how kind of credit card decisions are made by algorithm. And it the model, what makes it machine learning is that the model keeps updating itself based on new data points. So say that person didn't pay their credit card bill off for some reason, then that person is another data point in the cluster where they'll approve you, but they might approve you for a lower credit limit so that the bank doesn't have as large a default on it. And the clustering algorithm will keep learning and learning and learning until it builds a robust set of points that it's trained on to fit real world data sets.
Right, right. And well, in that I think that's a perfect example, and it makes, machine learning really vivid in a way. And I've never heard someone explain machine learning in a way that makes me want to learn it that much. But one question I think that immediately arises here is, if an algorithm, makes a decision on whether or not you're being given a credit card, or what your credit score, what effects the credit score has, that is based on a lot of quantitative factors that are oftentimes inserted into this series of computations, what is referred to as a black box, right? Where some algorithms, as you outlined, just take thousands and thousands of data points into mind, and then give you almost a binary answer: yes, that person will be or is eligible for our services, or no, that person is not eligible for our services. Whereas, if a human being were to make those decisions, they could factor in more than quantitative elements. They could bear qualitative factors in mind as well. Let's say, a person didn't pay off their credit card bills, but that was only because, 2 weeks earlier, their house burnt down because someone set it on fire and their insurance didn't cover it or whatsoever. Those factors are being lost when, decisions like that are only being made based on data points. So what would your answer kind of be to people who are afraid of this black box world where, everything that's going on is simply inputs, black box computation, decision?
This is kind of a problem. I think that has been being dealt with by society for a lot longer than a lot of people think about, but I think it's being brought to the surface heavily by things like machine learning. Because if you look at if you want to stay on the credit score example, for instance, if you look at certain neighborhoods and certain places of the United States, the average credit score is going to be significantly lower due to lower income. And this has, people have argued that this credit scores are a tool that has been used to keep people like minorities in poverty due to predatory lending practices, or focusing on people with bad credit to only decrease their credit and kind of keep people poor. So that black box idea, where it's a blanket yes or no idea of these people are in, these people are not. It's kind of existed, but you're right that machine learning accelerates that to a very deep degree. It's I had a conversation with a colleague of mine that I thought was really interesting. They spoke about how they thought machine learning could be used to admit people to universities versus not admit people to universities. And I don't agree with that. I think you eliminate a very large portion of the humanity that goes into university applications for undergraduate and graduate schools. People are pouring their hearts out in those statements of purpose. They worked hard on them, and they spent nights and weeks like researching and knowing who they wanted to work with in their PhD program or their master's program, and really honing in on the things that they want to study and they want to research. And to just have a machine rip through that in 10 seconds and say, no, you don't fit the this and criteria based on these numeric factors that the person that programmed this machine learning algorithm finds valuable. What weights do we put on these things? It's hard to that black box mentality is there in some scenarios. And I think Credit lending or finance is a very good example of that. But if you see machine learning starting to break into things like university acceptance, or I'm trying to think of another example. I mean, I think university acceptance is a very good one, where if you just have a machine deciding, and you have a set admissions limit percentage, and you say we have this many applications, so this many people can get in, and you just have an algorithm run through and pick the people it seems to fit the algorithm the best. That black box mentality is bad. I don't necessarily know if I have a way to calm people's nerves about it, because it is a scary concept that, if you just have machines making these decisions, there are still humans on the other side who program these things, and we might not always have the right idea of what's the most important part of the algorithm and what's the most human part, and people have different ideas. So it becomes a societal problem where, if it's a black box making the decisions, who programmed the black box?
Right. That's kind of the question it boils down to, and that's kind of where we close the circle in a way, where we come back to what we talked about earlier, that in that world where we could assume that only people with the best of intentions, who want to improve society, program the algorithms or analyze the data or make informed decisions based on that we would really live in a utopian world in a way. However, that is not necessarily granted. But Zach, I can only say that I'm more than excited that people like yourself, who I've been fortunate enough to know, and who I know who have the right intentions, are studying this field. And even though this decision is not made by a machine but by two individuals, we're kind of at the top of the time that we had allocated for this. So I know you're incredibly busy with your new program. How is work-life balance going for you?
What's a life?
Exactly. That's what I figured. So, dude, thanks so much for taking the time to come here. Any last words you want to, just say to our listeners here? Now would be your time.
Remember, everyone, the statistics and data science is an art more than it is a hard science. If you're interested in it, you should definitely look into it. If anything, please read Factfulness by Hans Rosling. It was a life-changing book, and it really puts, I think, the world as it currently exists into an amazing perspective that really is breathtaking, especially if you're from, what is considered to be the Western part of the world. Beyond that, Patrick, thank you so much for having me. I've immensely enjoyed this. I'm looking forward to hearing more of your conversations and more of the podcasts that you put out, and I'm honored that you invited me on.
Anytime, buddy, anytime. And as always, we'll have to stop when the conversation gets most interesting, but that gives us more room to explore and to think about and to speak up about the ideas that we might have. So, Zach, thank you so much.